All right, so now today what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at some other things, and we're going to start working towards being able to select out the various different things that we want in QGIS. And so over the next couple of videos, we will talk about how do you select attributes. So how do you select by information in that table? We're going to talk a little bit about how do we select things in space. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about joins and relates. So how do we take information from one layer and put it into another layer? Now, this can be very useful because once we start joining things together, we can also move from that data set where we're joining things in space and also transition that into other types of information. So taking a look at, aggregated information and trying to understand which things have more or less. And so converting between spatial and non-spatial things is one of the useful bits. So right now what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of time to take a look at selecting things out by attributes. And so from last time, we have our Mississippi 1860 census. So this is the population. We have the census of agriculture for the economic variables. We have our battle keywords from 2023. We have our Civil War battles. We have our Civil War and Reconstruction governor's letters of Mississippi as well. So we have all of those different things, the same data sets that we've been working towards. You can see that a lot of them span the whole US. And so this is what we're working with for today. So to select out by attributes, we first have to remember how do we get to our attribute table. So if I right click on any of these layers, midway up, we have our attribute table. And so if I click on it, we have all of the table information that is shown. And so this is all of the associated information. So any one of the points or polygons that's actually in QGIS on the map doesn't really show all of the associated information, but each one of these columns represents something about that point, about that polygon. And so each row is going to be a point or a polygon in this case, and each column is going to be some sort of information that is attached to it. So for the 1860 census of population, they had a count of how many male, female for the white population, for the freed people of color, for the enslaved population, and also they had a total count of both of all of that as well. And so in the last time round, we took a look and we said, okay, well, I want to visualize out part of this. So, but the other part about this, and it's not just about cartography. So cartography is visualizing out all of those different pieces of information. So doing the symbology, how do we make good maps that tell a story? But when we deal with GIS, it's not just about how do we tell a story with these beautiful maps. Instead, we have a lot of the back-end information that we can then use. And so there's a lot of information here that can tell us something about Mississippi, or that can tell us something about the census of population for Mississippi in 1860. And what that something is going to depend on what you're interested in. But one of the first things that we can do, and probably one of the most common GIS things that I personally do, is I select by attributes. And so selecting by attributes in this case is going to, all of these are largely number-based, right? So we do have county names over here that are text-based, but everything else in here is a number. And so with select by attributes, you can, or selecting for the table, you can select out by essentially any number operator that you use. So you can select out greater than, less than, equals to, is not equal to, whatever that something is, you can largely do. And so to select by attributes, it's going to be up in this top row here. And so you'll see the equation symbol with the yellow dot in this case. And so this is going to be select by attributes, or select by equation is what it says. And so this is done as a SQL, so SQL database. And so in the back end, it'll say essentially select star, select everything where. And then from here, you're going to create some sort of equation for what you want. So this is going to be some sort of equation where it'll end up as true or false. And from there, you'll be able to choose what is being done. So in this case, the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go down to your fields and values. Fields and values is going to give you all of the different columns that you can do. So in this case, let's say we want to do population, and we want to have a population that is greater than 1,000. So what this is going to do is it is going to select out all of the counties where the total population, everything, right? This includes white, enslaved, and free peoples of color. It's going to choose all of the counties where there's over 1,000 people in Mississippi. And I can say select features. Now in here, what you can see is that at the top, it says how many features total there are. It will say how many are selected. So in this case, selected is blue. And so what this is telling us is that there's a total of 60, and then 60 were selected. So in this data set, what it's saying is that all 60 of those counties have more than 1,000. Now I can up this by one order of magnitude, and I can say, okay, well, all of them have more than 1,000, but how many of them have more than 10,000? And I can select by features. And now what we'll see is, oh, well, we have 36 of those that are selected. And you can see in the table that that has actually dropped. Now, if I take a look at where this is in the map and I turn off the things, anytime you select by attributes, it's going to show up as this bright yellow. And so what you'll notice here is that you have this line that basically goes from the southwest to the northeast, and the highest proportion of that population is in this northeast area. Now, anyone, if you happen to know a little bit about Mississippi currently, you'll know that this is not the same distribution as to where there's the most people now. You have the most people in and around Jackson, in and around Hattiesburg, and along the coast. But back then, the coast was not highly populated. So if I go back here and I say, okay, that's great, but what about 100,000? And I select out those features. Well, so in this case, what you'll see is that that order of magnitude, there's nothing left, right? So none of these are selected. So I can then see what else I want. Maybe it's 5,000 I want. There is going to be more of those. Maybe it's 50,000 I want. There's going to be far less of those. There's only one. So in this case, with only one, this county here is going to be the most populated for that time period for Mississippi. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say 20,000. I'm going to close this out. Now, one other thing that you can do with these types of data once you have them selected out, generally speaking, once you have things selected out, anything you do subsequent to that is going to only act on those selected features. Now with QGIS, it does have that option where you can still make whatever process you do after run for everything as well. But oftentimes, this is something you'll select something out to then run another operation. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to select out this, and then I'm going to export that data. So what this is going to do is it's going to create a new data set, but one that only includes the things that are currently selected. So I'm going to go to export. I'm going to save to selected features. I'm going to save this, in this case, as a GeoJSON. I'm going to head over into my downloads, and I'm going to say the Mississippi 1860 census more than, I'm going to short form this into more than, and I think I had said that this was 50,000. I could be mistaken on that, but always double check what you have before you save it is usually a good plan. But for this case, that's just what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, great. I'm going to say, okay. And so now what you'll see is that over in the layer side of things, you end up with this new data set. It's now in brown. And so this brown data set is where this currently exists. So now there's just those areas. So that's going to be the first thing that you can do. Now, you can also do what's called select by location, right? So select by location is going to pop up with something different. So selecting by location is doing that same thing. It's selecting things out, but only where you have another type of information. So maybe in this case, I'm only interested in the battles, or let's go with the battles. So in this case, I've got Civil War battles that go all across the US. And so I do have some that are located in this area, and they're not all of the ones that happened in Mississippi. There's a couple of other ones that are located outside of these high population areas. So maybe what I want to do is, in this case, I'm only interested in the battles that happened in highly populated areas of the 1860s. So what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to go back and I'm going to go up to this top area here. You see that they're all in yellow. Yellow, for the purpose of QGIS, is what the color is for selection. And I'm going to say select by location. And I'm going to select all of the features from, in this case, so when you are selecting things out, this top one is going to be the thing you want out. So I want all the 1860s battles, right? That's the thing I'm looking for. And then I have to say, okay, well, what is the relationship? So there's a variety of different relationships that you can have. You can have intersect. If you intersect with something, think about an intersection at a road. Those are two roads that cross. You can have things that touch, right? So you can have two lines that touch, or two polygons that touch. For example, these two polygons here share a line, they touch. I can have contain, right? So I can have something that contains another thing, like a glass of water, or a polygon that contains points. I can have things that overlap. So a good example of that is these two polygons overlap a little bit. I can have things that are disjoint, so things that are not connected together. I can have things that are within. I can have things that are equal to, or I can have things that cross. So each of these are a little bit different, but it's always important to remember from what perspective. So in this case, we're going to say, I want all of the Civil War features or Civil War battles that are within this Mississippi 1860s high population area. And now I can say that I'm going to create a new selection. Currently, there's nothing selected, so that should be fine. And I'm going to run this and see what happens. And so what you'll see on the map is that all of a sudden, these battle points here that are in these zones, right? So if I zoom into this one's still in that area. So I now have all of those points that are in the polygons from the highly populated areas. So if I go to those Civil War battles and I open up the attribute table, we can see that 11 of those are selected. Now, you won't necessarily see them in here, but if I want to take a look and see which ones those are, I can go down to the bottom here and just say that I want to show selected features. So in this case, we've got in Warren, we've got in Alcorn, we've got in Tushmingo, we've got in Hinds County, Warren County, Prentiss, Lee, and so on and so forth. And we have all of the information associated from those battles, in addition to when they began and anything and who won, and all of the various different bits of information that we have here. So that's how we can select by location. Now, one of the things we can also do, though, is we can string these together. So what I mean by that is we can then take a look and say, okay, well, here are all of my Civil War battles that are the ones that I wanted. And I want, in this case, I have these Civil War battles. Maybe I want to select out all of the letters that are nearby to those, right? So now I have this other one. And so I'm not looking for the letters that contain them. I'm still looking for another version of that spatial selection. So, but maybe in this case, what I want to do is when I go to select by location, I want to select within a distance. So what this is going to do is it's going to create a buffer area around it. So it's going to say, okay, I want all of the letters that are within a certain amount of distance. So I can say, okay, well, I want to select features from, in this case, I want these letter tags, and I want all of the letter tags that are compared to the Civil War battles. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I want to use the selected features only, right? Because we have a selection in those Civil War battles. We already selected out those highly populated areas, and now I want to create a buffer. Now in here, you'll notice that it says by degrees. So this is decimal degrees. And so for reference, 1 decimal degree roughly equates to about 111 kilometers when you're at the equator. So depending on what you're interested in, you're probably going to go a lot smaller than that, because within 100 kilometers is going to be a lot larger. So in this case, what I can say is I want to get rid of this. And so this value would be 10 kilometers, and this value would be about 1 kilometer. So in this case, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, okay, I want everything that's within about a 1 kilometer radius of each of these Civil War battles, because I want to see what is being talked about in and around the Civil War battles. And I'm going to run that. Now, it says that there is no spatial index. This red is not a problem. All this is telling us is that it's going to run a little bit slower because there's no index. This is very common with a lot of GIS data sets, depending on who created them. And so you can create indices and things like that if you want, but in this case, I didn't. And so now this is run. And so what we can see here is that now we have a couple of things that have been selected out that are directly around these battles. So they're directly around those. And so I can right click on that, go to the attribute table, and I can see what is actually selected in this case. And so in this case, we actually have 2,568 things that are being talked about in and around those battles. And so in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to export those out. I'm going to say I'm going to export those selected features. I'm going to say those selected features, and I'm going to say that this is the CWRGM letters near Civil War battles in highly populated Mississippi counties. Now, this is a bit of a mouthful. You're probably going to want to do shorter names to some extent, but in this case, that's what we're going to do. And so this is going to then pop up on this far left-hand side here. And if I uncheck those, these are all of the different letters that are in and around those battles. So these are all of the different things that are being talked about. And from there, we can do more things. So those are two of the ways that you can do selections. One final thing to note about selections is if I am selecting by attributes, I can also select by some sort of text or name or something to that effect. And so with this one, you would do that in the same way. You'll notice that these letters have a lot of things that are text-based instead of number-based. And so, for example, in this case, I've got some stuff about government, some stuff about cities and towns, some stuff about legal organizations, and some political events. So maybe in this case, what I want to select out is all of the political events, just those ones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I want to select features by attributes. I'm going to go into my values. I'm going to go down to my category, and I'm going to say I want my category to be like. And in this case, I want something that is in and around political. And we're going to see whether or not we have any of those things. Now, one of the things you'll notice is that I have actually put a % sign on either side of those. That is what is called wildcards. Those wildcards are important because that will look for the word political, but this can be in the middle of the string. It doesn't have to be at the start or at the end. It doesn't have to be the only thing there. And so I can select that out. In this case, I have 17 things that are labeled as political, and in this case, they are labeled as political events. And so those are all the different things, and then you'll be able to see what exactly they are. These are talking about the Mississippi conventions, and all of the information about those events is part of those letters. And so if we take a look at where that potentially is located, it's going to be somewhere in those areas that we have already previously seen. So that's what we've got for selection. We're going to come back around in 1 second to take a look at spatial joins. So thank you so much, and I'll see you back here soon.